Hi, let's talk about the innervation of the eye. In this video, we'll discuss the somatic and autonomic innervation of the eye and regions of the orbit. Let's begin with cranial nerve 2, the optic nerve. The optic nerve emerges from the optic chiasm of the diencephalon. It travels through the optic canal to enter the orbit, and it takes a relatively deep pathway to the eye. The optic nerve is conducting special somatic afferent fibers back from the eye as part of the visual system. Next, cranial nerve 3, the oculomotor nerve, is going to emerge from the midbrain, specifically between two arteries, the posterior cerebral and superior cerebellar arteries. If there is an aneurysm in either of these arteries, it can endanger and entrap the oculomotor nerve, thus causing issues with the movement of the eye. The oculomotor nerve, from its origin, then continues through the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, which would be approximately there, on its way toward the orbit, where it enters the orbit with many other nerves through the superior orbital fissure. The oculomotor nerve has two major nervous modalities. The first, and probably most obvious by its name, is that it is somatic efferent to the extraocular muscles. So, oculomotor nerve drives the muscles that drive the eye. But not all of the extraocular muscles. The muscles that it innervates includes levator palpebrae superioris, the superior, middle, and inferior rectus muscles, and the inferior oblique. So that's going to leave out the superior oblique muscle and the lateral rectus muscles, which are innervated by the trochlear nerve and the abducens nerve, respectively. The second major modality that the oculomotor nerve is going to conduct is an autonomic function. The oculomotor nerve provides the preganglionic parasympathetic fibers to the ciliary ganglion. So here we can see the oculomotor nerve moving through the orbit, the superior division of which has been cut, and we can see that it is supplying fibers to that ciliary ganglion, which we'll discuss in a subsequent slide, which is a peripheral parasympathetic ganglion of the head. The two targets of the postganglionic fibers coming out of the ciliary ganglion, which will be conducted via short ciliary nerves to the eye, are the sphincter pupillae muscles. So sphincter pupillae muscles with parasympathetic stimulation are going to constrict the pupils. So those among you who are card players, if you're watching an opponent and they're looking at their cards and you see their pupils constrict, you know that they like what they see, so they're very confident. You probably want to avoid betting on that hand. The other target of the parasympathetic fibers are the ciliary muscles. These ciliary muscles are of the ciliary body, and they help to adjust the lens through an action known as accommodation. Next up, we have the trochlear nerve, cranial nerve number 4. The trochlear nerve emerges from the dorsal brainstem. It's quite unique among all the cranial nerves in that it is the only one that emerges from the dorsal side of the brain. It travels with the oculomotor nerve through the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus, and it's going to enter the orbit with that oculomotor nerve through the superior orbital fissure. The trochlear nerve has but one function, and that is to serve the superior oblique muscle, whose belly we can see here. The superior oblique muscle's tendon goes through a fibrocartilaginous pulley known as the trochlea before it then inserts on the sclera of the eye. And so the trochlear nerve is going to activate the superior oblique muscle. Next up, we have the abducens nerve, cranial nerve 6. The abducens emerges from the brainstem. It travels through the cavernous sinus, so not through the wall of the cavernous sinus, but through the cavernous sinus. It and the internal carotid artery are the two vessels which traverse the cavernous sinus. When it emerges from the cavernous sinus, it travels through the superior orbital fissure along with oculomotor and trochlear nerves. And its sole function is to serve the lateral rectus muscle. The lateral rectus muscle has a very simple function, and that is to abduct, gaze. And so the abducens nerve, when it stimulates the lateral rectus muscle, abducts gaze. So that's a helpful way of keeping track. Now we have a division of the trigeminal nerve known as the ophthalmic nerve, or V1 for short, as the trigeminal nerve is cranial nerve 5, represented by the Roman numeral 5. Its divisions are V1, V2, and V3. V1 and V2 are entirely sensory. V3 is mixed. And so the ophthalmic nerve and all of its nerves that branch from it will be afferent in nature. It's going to be somatic afferent from the orbit, the eye, and surrounding areas. Now there are several notable branches here. This illustration is of the superior orbit. And so we can see the trigeminal nerve here, and that's V1, V2, and V3. V1 travels with cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6 through that superior orbital fissure. V2 goes through foramen rotundum, and V3 travels through foramen ovale. So upon entering the orbit, there will be several branches, the most conspicuous of which, the largest, will be most superior. That's known as the frontal nerve. So we could see the frontal nerve there. The frontal nerve has two terminal branches. There is the supraorbital nerve, which is larger and more lateral. The supraorbital nerve has both medial and lateral branches. These are going to serve the skin of the medial superior palpebra, the skin of the forehead, and in part the frontal sinus. The second terminal branch of the frontal nerve is the supratrochlear nerve, which we can see there. The supratrochlear nerve is smaller and more medially oriented, and this is going to serve the frontal sinus as well as the skin of the medial forehead. We can also see the smallest branch of V1, and that would be the lacrimal nerve. The lacrimal nerve does not serve the lacrimal gland's totality of actions. In fact, it is only somatic afferent from the lacrimal gland and surrounding tissue, as well as the skin of the brow there, part of the lateral conjunctiva, part of the lateral palpebra, etc. We'll discuss the parasympathetic innervation of this gland in a subsequent slide. Spoiler alert, preganglionics are coming from the facial nerve, cranial nerve 7. The nasociliary nerve is another branch of the ophthalmic nerve. To see this, we have to look deeper in the orbit. So here we can see the nasociliary nerve coming through the superior orbital fissure. It's going to have branches which serve the ethmoidal air cells, so paranasal sinuses, the nasal cavity, an infratrochlear nerve to go out to serve the conjunctiva, skin of the palpebrae. And then it will serve the eye through two means, either through these long ciliary nerves or through branches that traverse the ciliary ganglion, and will also have fibers in those short ciliary nerves. So the afferent fibers from the eye are coming back through these long ciliary nerves or through the short ciliary nerves through the ciliary ganglion and back through the nasociliary nerve. The nasociliary nerve also is going to conduct postganglionic sympathetic fibers. These fibers are actually hitchhiking on the nasociliary nerve. They're coming ultimately from the superior cervical ganglion of the sympathetic trunk, and those fibers make their way into the skull through perivascular plexuses associated with the internal carotid artery. It's a very major pathway of sympathetics into the skull. And these fibers that hitchhike via nasociliary are going out to serve the dilator pupillae muscles, which are intrinsic eye muscles, which work opposite the sphincter pupillae muscles of the eye. So these dilator pupillae muscles during a sympathetic response are going to dilate the pupils so as to let in a significant amount of light. So the ciliary ganglion, which I will highlight there on that illustration, is going to communicate with the eye via short ciliary nerves. So these short ciliary nerves are the only conduit between the ciliary ganglion and the eye. And there are three major conduits sort of passing through here. And some of them will synapse and some of them will not synapse. So let's start with what we've discussed previously. So with respect to the nasociliary nerve, so the nasociliary nerve is here. We can see that coming out to serve the orbit. There are going to be somatic afferent fibers, which we can see here in dark green, that are being conducted through those short ciliary nerves, through the ciliary ganglion, and back to the nasociliary root. There also will be postganglionic parasympathetic fibers, and those postganglionic parasympathetic fibers are going to serve the sphincter pupillae muscles and the ciliary muscles. The preganglionic fibers that are going out to serve those targets are coming from, recall, the oculomotor nerve. So cranial nerve 3 is here. We can see that. And these light blue fibers are coming through and they are synapsing here in the ciliary ganglion. And then the postganglionic or postsynaptic fibers are going out to serve the sphincter pupillae muscles and the ciliary muscles. So we go 3 preganglionic, ciliary ganglion, synapse, and then short ciliary nerves out to the sphincter pupillae and the ciliary muscles. There are also postganglionic sympathetic fibers. Those postganglionic sympathetic fibers are going to serve perivascular plexuses of the intraocular vessels And when stimulated, they are going to lead to vasoconstriction of those vessels. Those postganglionic sympathetic fibers come from the superior cervical ganglion of the sympathetic trunk, traveling via perivascular plexuses associated with the internal carotid artery. And keep in mind, these are postganglionic sympathetic fibers. They are synapsing already in the sympathetic trunk, so they do not synapse in the ciliary ganglia. And then finally, we have the facial nerve, cranial nerve 7. The facial nerve is a bit of an odd duck for the orbit. We're discussing it here because it has a role in the parasympathetic innervation of the lacrimal gland. So here we can see the lacrimal gland, which is in the superolateral aspect of the orbit. Let's start down here, however. Here we can see the facial nerve traversing an osseous canal in the temporal bone, and it's sending off, here in green, preganglionic parasympathetic fibers heading out to another peripheral parasympathetic ganglion called the pterygopalatine ganglion, also known as the sphenopalatine ganglion. So this pterygopalatine ganglion is found in the pterygopalatine fossa. Those preganglionic fibers synapse there, and they're going to hitchhike their way up to the lacrimal gland via branches of the maxillary division of trigeminal nerve, or V2. So here we can see V2, and we can see those fibers hitchhiking up to the lacrimal gland. Some of them may even hitchhike their way up to the lacrimal nerve before being conducted out to the gland. So the facial nerve, therefore, when it stimulates the lacrimal gland parasympathetically, is going to cause lacrimation, or the secretion of tears. The other mention that the facial nerve deserves in the context of this lab is that it is somatic efferent to the muscles of facial expression. That's probably why we call it the facial nerve. But specifically, it is going to innervate the orbicularis oculi muscle. That muscle that is going to sit anterior to the orbit and control the size and somewhat the shape of that palpebral fissure through which the eye gazes. So we've discussed cranial nerves 2, 3, 4, V1, and 7, as well as the ciliary ganglion, the various targets of the cranial nerves and their modalities, as well as some of the details of their pathways. This is your summary slide. Thank you for your time.